I'm Binesh Javed. Welcome to the show. It's day 25 of the Iran war, and for the first time, Donald Trump is suggesting that a diplomatic solution to the conflict may be in sight. Trump says Iran is ready to make a deal. Iran says it hasn't even been talking to the Americans. Rosemary Kalyanik is director of the Middle East program at the Washington-based foreign policy think tank Defense Priorities. Rosemary, welcome to the show. We will talk about we will talk about these contradictory statements and what they mean for the conflict. Before we get into the details, Rosemary, tell me what went through your head today when you heard Trump say that a negotiated solution with Iran is within reach.
A mixture of hope and disbelief, frankly. I think it's time for this war to end. This war never should have started to begin with. And it would be very smart for the United States to try to get a peace deal with Iran, or at least a ceasefire with Iran. By the same token, it's hard to believe that negotiations, if they're even happening, are anywhere close to that happening. You also have to wonder about the timing of Trump's announcement happening just as markets open on a Monday morning and announcing this postponement of attacks on energy infrastructure for 5 days, which conveniently ends with markets closing on Friday. So there's got to be quite a bit of skepticism, I think, when you hear about this, and I certainly felt that way.
And we will discuss a lot of that in detail. But before we go deeper into the discussion, I'd like to play two statements by Donald Trump. Here's the president 3 days ago.
Their leaders are all gone. The next set of leaders are all gone. And the next set of leaders are mostly gone. And now nobody wants to be a leader over there anymore. We're having a hard time. We want to talk to them, and there's nobody to talk to. We have nobody to talk to. And you know what? We like it that way.
So that was Trump 3 days ago. And here's what he said on Monday.
Had very, very strong talks. We'll see where they lead. We have major points of agreement. I would say almost all points of agreement. We'll at some point very, very soon meet. We're doing a 5-day period. We'll see how that goes. And if it goes well, we're going to end up with settling this. Otherwise, we'll just keep bombing our little hearts out.
So, Rosemary, from nobody to talk to we had very strong talks. What happened in the last few days?
All we can do is guess, right? All we have is speculation because we don't know for sure. I think the most likely answer is that Trump sort of realized that attacking Iran's energy infrastructure and giving Iran a 48-hour deadline to open Hormuz, or else he would do that, that was not actually a threat that the United States was prepared to carry out. And that having this kind of, we're having talks with them and it's going well, and so we're going to postpone these attacks on energy infrastructure. It's just a convenient way, I think, for him to back down from that deadline without looking weak necessarily, or trying not to look weak. But I don't take it literally. As there's a saying in the US, you've probably heard it, take the president seriously, but not literally. I don't take him literally that they had no one to talk to 3 days ago and suddenly they have strong talks today.
Trump was asked today who the Iranian contact person on the American side actually is. Here's his answer.
A top person. Don't forget, we've wiped out the leadership phase 1, phase 2, and largely phase 3. But we're dealing with the man who I believe is the most respected and the leader. It's a little tough. We've wiped out everybody.
Is that the Supreme Leader?
No, not the Supreme Leader. We don't. Well, nobody heard of the second Supreme Leader, the son.
Are these direct?
Nobody. We have not heard from the son. Every once in a while, you'll see a statement made, but we haven't. We don't know if he's living.
Who do you think this top person is?
I'm not sure there is a top person, to be honest with you. So I taught college for 10 years, and what struck me from Trump's statement is that he sounded like a student who hadn't done the reading for the day's class and was sort of making it up on the spot without doing a very good job of selling his story. So I doubt that there's a top person. And just the way that Iran operates, it's much more likely that there's indirect talks or indirect messaging going on, if there's any messaging at all. And we've seen some reporting from more the Iranian perspective of things, saying that there have been some notes passed with mediators in Turkey, Oman, Pakistan, and Egypt. So that's still like a secondary channel, not a direct channel between the US and Iran.
And we will talk about these countries, the involvement, the reports of involvement of these countries. But just as you mentioned that you don't see Trump's statements as credible. My question is, but he keeps giving these statements. How are people in the US responding to his statements?
Well, I think they're responding in very similar ways, to the reaction that I'm having, which is that they don't really believe it. They're cautiously optimistic, or they're hopeful, right? I think everybody in the United States wants this war to end. Certainly, polling suggests that the war is unpopular, and that Americans don't want Trump to escalate the war and don't want him to put boots on the ground, for instance. But we've seen multiple times when Trump has had back and forths with other countries who he's threatening, that he will sometimes appear to be backing down or easing off the pressure, only to then strike not long after. And so it sort of could be a diplomatic feint. So I think there's just a lot of skepticism about it from Trump. And I think that Americans are sort of, we're kind of inured to him making comments in many different directions at once. And nobody really takes those comments literally anymore. So it's very hard to know, but I think people are skeptical.
And coming back to that potential Iranian contact, there have been some reports that Trump is not naming his alleged Iranian contact because he fears the Israeli military might eliminate that person. I mean, after all, Israel has said it would treat any Iranian leader as a potential target.
Yeah, I mean, that's possible. I don't know whether to take those reports with more than a grain of salt, or I would take those reports with a grain of salt, but I think that they're picking up this general dynamic, which is true, which is that the US and Israel are not on the same page about why this war is being fought, how long this war should be fought for, and how it's going to end. And it seems like every step along the way, Israel is pushing the US to escalate. For instance, by Israel attacked Iran's natural gas field, which led Iran to retaliate against Qatar's natural gas field, which has had massive repercussions and made it harder to pull back from the war. So, overall, U.S. and Israeli interests are not completely aligned in this scenario. And, there's belief in the United States that Israel wants us to fight longer, to change the regime, to collapse the regime, and that this is not necessarily something that, certainly it's not something that's in U.S. interests. And we're not even sure that it's something that Trump himself has bought into as a rationale or an end state that's necessary from this war.
And Rosemary, in your point of view, who is on the driving seat? Is it the US or Israel?
It's both. I mean, you can't, it's convenient from an American perspective. It's very convenient to blame Israel for a war that's unpopular and is frankly a mistake to fight. And I do think that Israel is somewhat responsible for putting ideas into the US's sort of, head, or telling Trump, we need to do this. It'll be easy, right? As soon as we kill the supreme leader, the Iranians will capitulate. We certainly have heard reports that the Israelis told the United States this. But ultimately, the United States is the senior partner in this relationship. And the United States has the power to say no to Israel, and it can do that. So the U.S. is at least as much to blame, if not more so, than Israel. And I would note that Trump is not the first president that the Israelis have approached asking them to go to war with Iran. Israel has been asking the United States to strike Iran's nuclear facilities since at least the days of George W. Bush. And so, Trump is just the first president, Trump 2.0, his second term, is just the first president to actually give Israel that wish. And so that's on Trump's shoulders, not Israel's.
And many would argue that Trump has taken a really big gamble. Coming back to negotiations, there are reports saying that the Iranian parliament speaker, Mohammad Baghir Kalibaf, is potentially the secret American contact. But this is how he responded today. This is what he said. No negotiations have been held with the US, and fake news is used to manipulate the financial and oil markets and escape the quagmire in which the US and Israel are trapped. So, Rosemary, could Kalibaf be right when he says Trump has only made this announcement to calm down the stock and oil markets?
Yes, he absolutely could be right. He absolutely could be right because Trump has given every indication that he cares very deeply about what the stock market does. He considers it to be a referendum on his presidency. And so when the stock market doesn't do well, he takes that as a sign that his presidency isn't doing well, and he responds. And that's quite evident to everybody. And it could be the case here. I think it's also just, we need to take what the president's saying seriously, but with some disbelief or some skepticism, also because we've had talks with Iran twice already, during which the United States bombed Iran in the middle of talks. So I think we should expect Iran to be very reluctant to have talks with the United States, certainly when a war is on. I mean, it's pretty unprecedented to have a talk about anything other than a ceasefire when you're at war with somebody. So they're not going to suddenly make concessions on the nuclear program in the middle of a war. Like, no country does that because it just incentivizes other countries to declare war on them. But so Iran has a lot of reason not to trust the United States, has a lot of reason to be coy about negotiating with the US because they think they're in a position of strength right now with their ability to threaten continued closure of the Strait of Hormuz and potential US casualties if the US intervenes on the ground. It just doesn't make a lot of sense that Iran would be eager to have negotiations with the US right now.
Okay. So you're saying that Iran may not be eager to negotiate, but do you think there is still a possibility that Kalibaf is actually running the negotiations yet publicly denying it?
I mean, anything's possible, but I doubt it. It's just not really how Iran rolls. I mean, I would be surprised. I would be very surprised, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So Trump has been emphasizing for days how well this war is going for the United States. How urgently do you think he wants the war to end?
I think he's totally made up his mind just to himself. But I think in general, he wants the war to end. I mean, he knows that it's not popular. He knows that his hardcore supporters will follow him to some extent. But if gasoline prices in the United States go through the roof and stay that way, I mean, that is just terrible for the midterm elections, and it's terrible for his presidency. And he is so unpopular that if the Democrats control both houses of Congress, you could have, if they control just the House, you could have a third impeachment of Trump. So, I mean, that's not something that he's looking forward to. So I think that those are strong incentives for him to want to end this war. But I don't think he wants to end it unless he can somehow plausibly declare victory. And that's going to be a very hard pill for Iran to swallow because Iran has no incentive to allow Trump to unilaterally end the war and just say, I've won, because then that teaches Trump that he can go to war and stop the war on a whim whenever he wants without any consequences. And it would incentivize Trump to then attack Iran 6 months from now if he so chooses. It's a very difficult situation. Trump, I think, does genuinely want out, but I don't think he's willing to be humble about it or to make real concessions to Iran that I think Iran would demand for an end to the war.
Rosemary, you had earlier mentioned Pakistan. Pakistan borders Iran, and there have been reports today that Pakistan may be hosting direct talks between the US and Iran in Islamabad as soon as this week to, with the aim to end the war. How credible are these reports?
Credible are they? I don't know. They're somewhat credible. It's possible. I mean, Pakistan certainly has an incentive to want this war to end because it could have spillover effects to both Pakistan and Afghanistan in terms of refugee flows. Pakistan also has a security deal with Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia is under attack from Iran. So Pakistan would rather have this war end than have to go defend Saudi Arabia. So it's plausible. But again, I'm not convinced that Iran is ready to stop unless the U.S. makes real concessions. And I think the concessions would have to be, a complete ceasefire, both by the United States and Israel, and probably a ceasefire not just against Iran, but also against Lebanon. There's also been some rumblings from the Iranian side that they expect reparations for the damage caused to Iran by U.S. airstrikes. So, I don't think that they're willing to have really serious talks unless those things are on the table. And I don't think they're on the table on the U.S. side.
Okay, let's assume even if Trump, wants to end the war and he reaches a deal with the Iranians, but Israel is also fighting this war alongside the Americans. Do you think Israel is ready to end it?
Probably not. I don't think that they're ready to end it yet. Although it depends on reporting and what we think their situation is with interceptors. So there's been some reporting in the past few days that suggests that more Iranian missiles are getting through and hitting neighborhoods, that they're causing more damage in Israel, that perhaps Israel is running low on missile defense interceptors. And if that's the case, that might mean that Israel would be more willing to end the conflict, if only to restock its interceptors. It's less clear that Israel is willing to end the conflict against Lebanon, which is a much lesser threat, and which some folks in Israel are openly calling for annexation of parts of Lebanon to be parts of Israeli territory. So I'm skeptical that Israel is ready for that.
Okay, to wrap up in the end, can you give us a worst case scenario and also a best case scenario of where do you think this war could end?
So the worst case scenario for the United States, from the U.S. perspective, would be this war turning into something like Afghanistan, where the U.S. inserts ground forces, and Afghanistan started with just a limited number of ground forces, to try to seize some kind of limited objective like islands in the Strait of Hormuz or Karg Island, but then ends up getting trapped in a larger, longer war, where more forces are put in to protect the forces that were inserted, and this war continues for a long period of time without making much progress. And I don't think that Trump is patient enough to fight a 20-year war. He also won't be around 20 years from now. But that's a real possibility that would be bad for the United States. I think the best case scenario, which is unlikely, but would be the best case, would be if Iran and the United States fight it out, have a new level of understanding of each other's core interests and capabilities, and then we're able to sit down and work out some kind of comprehensive, after a ceasefire, right, some kind of comprehensive political settlement that had a nuclear component to it, and perhaps also a ballistic missile component, at least for intercontinental ballistic missiles, restrictions on those. And then that could pave the way for better relations in the region and a lack of chaos in the region going forward. That's a very slim chance, but that would be the best case.
I think we all would want and hope for the best case scenario. Rosemary Klianik with the think tank Defense Priorities, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
So what do you think? Are peace talks on the horizon, or is the war far from over? Let us know in the comments. If you like this video, please hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Take care and goodbye.